I call my wife and I say, I've got an active shooter, love you. And then I hung up.
Hey gang, I was at my local gun shop the other day picking up a little EDC, a little micro 9mm the other day, and I had a glimpse at the ammo prices, and it's nuts how expensive ammunition is these days. That's why Mantis Firearms Training System is a longtime sponsor of Active Self-Protection. We're so grateful for them and for their product. Getting immediate, measurable visual feedback can take so much time out of the learning curve of dry fire, and this product is worth every penny. It's so inexpensive for what you get. In our opinion, what gets measured gets improved, and this helps you measure every aspect of dry and live fire. Visit them at mantis.com and let them know you heard about them on the Ask Podcast. All right, welcome back to the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am your host, Mike Williver, your favorite former Fed. With us today, a gentleman who is a law enforcement officer in Colorado. He is married with 2 kids. He is a mutual acquaintance with Stephen Gutowski, who interviewed him back in 2018 for the Free Beacon. You can check that if you just Google Free Beacon, Quinn Cunningham, it'll pop up, and it's a really good article, so you should go check that out. Quinn, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
My pleasure. So we usually get started talking to people about their background a little bit. So did you grow up in Colorado? Is that your home state? And did you grow up around guns, firearms, that sort of thing?
Well, I grew up in Iowa until I was about 13, and then I moved to Colorado, and have always been around firearms. My mentor was my brother-in-law, and he taught me everything I know about firearms. He taught me right. I couldn't touch anything until I recited the 4 firearm safety rules to him, and very positive influence in my life as far as firearms go.
So was he, or is he a law enforcement or military, or just a guy who knows about guns?
He's just a guy who knows about guns.
Right on. We have a lot of those who listen, so they will appreciate that. Let me ask you, why did you get into law enforcement? Now, obviously, the usual answer is because you wanted to help people. That is actually true in quite a few cases. I know I did. I saw cops intervening and stuff in my life and family when I was little, and I always thought, you know what, it's safer when the cops get here. I feel safe. Like, that was kind of my motivation. So what about you?
Well, that's a typical oral board question the recruit would give before being hired. I got in for different reasons. I watched Lethal Weapon and thought it would be cool. I could drive fast. I could carry a gun.
Outstanding.
Never wrote a report. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I did. And I had to write a lot of reports.
That's great. Yeah, my buddy Mike Haynes, he's one of my old partners from San Diego. He jokes about the show 24. Remember that show, Jack Bauer? And he's like, man, they show that guy nonstop for 24 hours straight. I never once saw him do a vehicle report or monthly hours or file a report or use a bathroom for that matter. It's amazing how Hollywood portrays our job. So Quinn, you're a law enforcement officer in Colorado. I found being a Fed and moving around the country and working with different agencies, there's different cultures, different levels of training. So tell us about your academy, generally speaking. Do you feel it prepared you for the job? And did you have an academy that was specific to your agency, or was it a regional academy with different agencies all attending the same one?
Well, I went through in 1995 is when I went to the academy, and a lot has changed since then. My academy was through a community college, and where I paid to get the certification and then would eventually later get hired by my agency. The academy, in my opinion, the skills were great. The driving was great. The arrest control was awesome. The firearms were awesome. The things that you do every day as far as the Fourth Amendment stuff, not as good as it could have been.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I went through the criminal investigator school for the feds. It's kind of, most of the federal agencies go through it if you're a special agent for any agency, except for FBI and DEA. They're too special. No, they're not. But we had a Fourth Amendment instructor, and I can only hope he hears this one day, named Bobby Lewis. Bobby Lewis was the chief of police in some small little town in the South. I can't remember, it'd be Georgia somewhere. And he had this really odd way of speaking. But man, that guy made Fourth Amendment class and instruction as fun as firearms, as fun as driving. That's how good he was. So I understand the importance of that. Fourth Amendment is probably your biggest hurdle as a law enforcement officer, knowing when you can and can't do things. What is an exigency and what is not, all that sort of thing. So at any point, did you get any follow-on training, or did you have to learn the hard way by getting cases thrown out of court?
I learned the hard way by my FTOs. Field training officers set me straight. And I'm the kind of person, I see a deficiency, then I try to fix it.
Sure. And as a young cop, you're raring to go. You want to run and gun and catch bad guys. And if you don't know what you don't know, you screw up a traffic stop, you don't have probable cause to do whatever you're doing, and that case gets tossed out, and your bad guy doesn't stay in prison, and that's something we want.
Exactly.
So talk to us. We're going to talk about an active shooter call that you responded to in 2013. Prior to that incident, that was obviously long after Columbine. So most agencies had active shooter training of some sort, and it was pretty standard at that point. Had you gone through active shooter training prior to this event, and how would you characterize it as being good active shooter training, mediocre, or not so good?
Well, I was one of the instructors, so I thought it was pretty good.
Of course.
My agency was one of the agencies that did respond to Columbine, and we took it to heart. We did. We changed everything after that, and we were very proactive, and we are still one of the more proactive agencies when it comes to training, just training in general and responding to active killers.
So can you characterize the size of your agency roughly?
We're about 600 sworn.
Okay, that's a big department.
Yeah.
600 sworn. Okay. So as an instructor, where did you receive your instruction to become an instructor, or did you guys create your own syllabus? How did that work?
Well, after Columbine, we had several of the SWAT guys, myself included, go to different classes, and then we brought those classes together to figure out what works for us, for our agency, for our culture, and what is best for public safety interests. I went through, I believe it was in a NTOA class, my initial one, and then we got together. We built all the curriculum from there, and we're pretty proactive on it.
That's National Tactical Officers Association, for those who do not know. And they're kind of the final word, generally speaking, on SWAT, special response team stuff in the country. They're kind of the gold standard. You mentioned that you were SWAT. Have you been through and or instructed training for patrol officers and SWAT? And is it different for the two? I assume, we don't wait around for a SWAT team. Columbine told us that, or at least we're not supposed to, current events notwithstanding.
Yes.
Is the training different for a SWAT officer in that role as a SWAT officer versus a patrol officer? I assume there's some variance, or is it all the same thing?
Well, we try to keep it simple, and the tenets of you run to the gunfire. If it's a static situation, then you do a clearance kind of thing. You locate them, you isolate them, you contain them, and then you start evacuations and things like that. Or you locate them, you isolate them, you contain them, and then you eliminate the threat. It's pretty synonymous for both, because we try to keep all the tactics the same, because part of our SWAT team are patrol guys or have collateral duties.
Sure.
One part is full-time. So when it comes to the difference in training, there really isn't that much difference, because we want to keep it all the same, keep it repeatable, and keep it relevant.
Absolutely. Yeah. I did a few classes as an instructor, and when I went through the basic active shooter response training for an instructor school in Fort Benning, Georgia, the head of the department there got up and kind of half jokingly said, he heard it once from an old cop in the South who said there's two rules when there's an active shooter: find him and kill him, which is kind of funny, but it's not untrue. It's not rocket, as my bus driver at the academy once said, it's not rocket surgery. You find the threat. I had another guy on, a buddy of mine, Jeff, who's an SRT Fed SWAT member, and he kind of said the same thing you said. It's not that complicated. I hate talking about Uvalde, because it's just everything I've seen thus far has indicated that it was a colossal failure on the part of law enforcement. And I don't like to criticize the cops too harshly. I do that sometimes on the Active Self-Protection channel when we do a badge cam and the cop just makes a hash of it, which happens. Even more stuff's come out recently where it looks like from the video, it looks like they never even attempted to go into the room. They never even checked the door. They were standing there for a long time. What are your thoughts on that from what we've heard so far and what you know about it?
Well, responded to an incident myself, and seen things on patrol for 10 years. Initially, I was very, very angry for a couple days, And I didn't want to judge the guys who were there. I wanted to actually look at some type of legitimate after action reports
Right.
before I made any kind of determination on um, where the problems were at. And I took some time, and then I did a bunch of research, and now I can say that there was some huge failures in their response, their plan once they got there. Huge breakdowns in failure. There's just huge failures.
Yeah, it seems like communication was an issue. I was talking to our friend Stephen Gutowski about it on his show, and one of the things I said was, you can't judge, the third or fourth guy from the fifth or sixth agency showing up on the scene and there's chaos, and he can't just go running in the building when there's already a presence there. He or she needs to find out what's going on first. And I'm sure there was agencies showing up late, and there's cops here and there's cops there, and no one knows who's in charge, is what it sounds like. It sounds like the chief didn't have comms, he didn't have a portable radio, and so there's a lot of things to criticize. But I think for some of the agencies that showed up later, they had to be like, well, what's the plan? What's going on? Like they needed to get a grasp, because they can't. There's already people there who they would assume have a plan, who would assume are taking appropriate action, and they can't just run inside or run around the back without checking with them to see what's going on. That's once this thing has gotten that far, if you're arriving on scene, you need to check with who's there and see what the plan is. And it sounds like they were asking and they were getting stalled, and finally the Border Patrol TAC team went in eventually. Would you concur with that assessment, that the people later on the scene aren't able to just rush inside when there's already units in place, or do you disagree?
No, absolutely. There should be a planned response to each one of these. This should have been planned months ago. The breakdowns started with leadership. Leadership is the thing that if you have any problems in your agency, in wherever you work, they're leadership problems. And this was a huge leadership problem. Well, I didn't want to bring my radio with me because I wanted to put both hands on my gun. What?
Yeah.
When I go out as a SWAT team supervisor, when something happens and I get called out in the middle of the night, the very first thing I'm grabbing is my radio, not my weapon. I'm grabbing my radio, so I have situational awareness of what's going on. And I can start making decisions right then and there while I'm running lights and sirens to the incident. I think that excuse about the radio was fabricated by an attorney. And then once on scene, I'm going to just look at my notes. Once on scene, the chief says, if you're all ready to do it, you do it. What does that even mean?
I don't know.
That's like Robert E. Lee's orders at Gettysburg. Take the hill if practicable.
Mm-hmm.
Giving that ambiguous language in a tactical situation where children are dying is ridiculous. You have to give clear, concise orders, and there were none. At one point in time, they've got two doors. I'm starting to go off on a tangent. I apologize, Mike.
I'm listening.
There's 19 in the hallway. You have 19 cops and one shooter. I love those odds. They have two breach points, one to room 111 and one to room 112. They could have done a diversion and then entered the other breach point. When he's shooting at them through the door, that's information on where he's at.
Mm-hmm.
You can do another breach on the door with leave 4 in the hallway. That's 15 guys that can go in and save children from being killed. Are you kidding me? Now, to answer your question, typically on a response like this, what you do is the first initial guys, they go in. They run to the gunfire. They give information to a supervisor or tactical supervisor, however you run the incident command system. You give information to that person. Somebody is in charge of that scene. At some point in time, they will make the determination, I need everybody else to stage here with rescue. I'm sending one cop in with one ambulance at a time, things like that. For the guys who showed up later, what do you want me to do?
Mm-hmm.
The typical answer is take a perimeter spot. Well, you're, and these guys on perimeter have no idea what's going on, and then the parents are trying to get past them.
And one did successfully. She was stopped, handcuffed, and then released, and then managed to hop a fence or something to get in there, get her kids out of there. And kudos to her.
God bless her.
You know, Stephen and I were discussing when the chief down there came out with a statement that, just, this is my opinion, of course. Stephen's a reporter. He has to say things responsibly. I can just say whatever I want. When I read the statement, what you said is spot on. It was crafted by an attorney. Why didn't that statement come out in the following days? Why did it take so long? Because he sat down with an attorney and they went over it, probably an attorney for the school district or an attorney for the city or whatever, who says, this is what we're going to say. I'm not going to go so far as to say it was fabricated, but it was at least carefully crafted for public consumption because they know every word is going to be picked apart by the press, as it should be.
Right, and that's probably a better choice of words than mine.
Quinn, we both know an attorney would never fabricate something for public
never,
consumption.
no, never.
That would be a violation of their high moral standards and oaths. I got like two attorneys that I like. It's okay. So let's discuss your incident. I know it's not easy to talk about. It's been about 9 years now since you responded to an active killer incident at a school. Can we say what level school it was, if it was elementary, high school, or whatever?
It was a high school.
Okay. And was this in your jurisdiction or was it a neighboring jurisdiction?
It was my jurisdiction.
Okay. Was it in your beat? Like, were you the patrol guy for that beat?
No, I was assigned to the training unit at the time as the lead firearms instructor. And I was in the office and I was still on the SWAT team. I was in the office when I was advised about it.
Okay, so you're in the office. This call goes out. How far is it from where you are to the school?
Running code 3 in the middle of the day, it took us probably about 7 minutes.
And I think you and I both know how long 7 minutes is when there's shots being fired. It's an absolute eternity. You're on the way over there. You're getting information over the radio on your way. What are you hearing? What are you hearing from the officers that are already on scene?
Well, it's for lack of better term, it's a funny story in parts. I was sitting in the office. I was injured in the line of duty, and I wasn't supposed to respond to anything. And I was doing something very courageous. I fell down the stairs with a laptop, and but I saved the laptop.
I salute you, sir.
Thank you. I'm just sitting. I was working on lesson plans or something, and one of the guys from investigations runs down in the training unit and yells, "We have an active shooter." I grabbed, not being prepared because I was on light duty at the time. I grabbed a radio that wasn't mine. I grabbed a rifle out of the armory that wasn't zero to me, a couple mags, and a bag full of ammo that was someone had been fired and turned over their ammo to us, and took off limping out the door across the parking lot. Got in this an unmarked car with this investigator who was waiting for me, and he's running code. He's screaming at people to get out of the way because in the middle of the day, when you're in an unmarked car, no one stops, no one pulls over. Being a Fed, you know what it's like.
Ask me how I know. Yeah.
I'm loaded mags. I call my wife and I say, "I've got an active shooter. Love you," and then I hung up. Talking to her later, all she could hear was the guy I was with screaming at the other drivers in the siren, and she figured something was up. Trying to get some information on the radio. It was aired as school is going on lockdown. I don't know why, by the SRO. The SRO was on scene. And then there was one of the lessons that I learned is there wasn't a lot of radio discipline. Everybody's getting on the radio. I'm en route.
No one cares.
Location.
No one cares if you're en route. Just be en route.
It just shut up and go.
Mm-hmm.
Just shut up and go. So it was hard to get any kind of situational awareness. When I arrived on scene, he parked. I start limping towards the school, and I look down, and I'm in khaki 511 pants, a plain polo shirt, carrying a rifle with nothing on me that says law enforcement anywhere. And I thought, well, this is how I'm going to die.
Right.
So I turn around, I go to the next patrol car near me, who's a lieutenant. And I'm like, "Sir, do you have any kind of raid vest outer carrier or something that says police on it. And this lieutenant we call Eeyore because he moves about that speed.
Mm-hmm.
Opens up his trunk. He's looking around, methodically looking around. I grabbed a traffic vest, bright yellow traffic vest. I threw that on, and I went running into the school. So I link up with a couple cops from an outside jurisdiction. I had no idea who they were. I'd never seen them before, and I haven't seen them since. And we enter the school. As we enter the school, we initially run into about seven other law enforcement officers from a few different agencies. And there was a street supervisor with them who was kind of directing them because the shooting had stopped at some point in time, right before I showed up. And we were given information that the subject is in the library. And this supervisor is directing people where to go. I told him, I'm taking these two guys because one identified himself as an EMT, and we're going to go to the victims. So these guys are doing their slow, methodical clearance, trying to find the suspect, and we're just beating feet through the school. Now, one thing that we do in active shooter training is we have a lot of distractions. We have fire alarms going off. We play music from haunted houses and all this other crazy stuff, just to overwhelm senses.
Sure.
And when I went in that school, the silence was absolutely deafening. The school had lockdown. They had very, very good lockdown procedures. The kids were hiding. They were hiding in the deep corners in classrooms, armed with chairs, books, pencils, anything they could. If anybody was going to come to that door, they're going to start fighting. Great job on the school. As we're moving through the school, we find the library. We go in the library, and we talked to the SRO there, and the suspect was down at that point in time from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. The library, it appeared to me that, I smelled the accelerant from Molotov cocktails, and some other type of IED device was thrown in there. We spoke real quick. Dude, are you good? What do you need? He's like, I'm good. Stay here. Just look for other victims. So we went back out. And when we went back out, that is when I ran into the crime scene that quite frankly changed the course of my life. In this situation, this guy came in. He fired. He came in with a shotgun. First student he sees, she asked him what he's doing, and he shoots at her once and he misses, and you can see where she was sitting, the brick wall where the shotgun blast had hit. And then the second shot, he shot her in the face, and you could see from the evidence of the wall where it hit. And I looked down, and there's blood everywhere. They picked her up and ran down the hallway. Something else happened. They turned around and came back. So there was probably about 35 yards of blood, and then 35 yards of blood coming out.
So when you say they picked her up, who picked her up?
It was a security guard, an unarmed security guard.
Okay.
When you look at the scene, you have the blood and you have the brick and all this debris. And I looked down, and there was this lock of hair, and she had this very beautiful, long, straight hair. And time stopped for me. It didn't slow down, it stopped. And looking at her hair in that moment in time changed my life. And her beauty and the beauty of this hair transcended all of this evil and chaos and death. And at that point in time, I made the decision, I'm going to do something about this. And I'm never going to see any more victims. And I'm going to give everyone I possibly can the ability to protect themselves.
Let's talk about that for a minute. I've talked to, obviously, in the wake of Uvalde, we've talked to a number of fellow active shooter instructors, and there's a lot of different theories, a lot of different ideas on some of the subtle nuances of the response. For example, I spoke with one gentleman who said, look, we need to quit locking down and putting students, in the corner of a room. That makes them a better target. That collects them all in one spot to be shot at. Other people would say, no, let's get them out. Let's put them in the corner, or let's jump out the window, or let's run down the hall, or whatever the case may be. As you're teaching your classes, and we'll discuss that organization here in a moment, what do you recommend that students do? So there is a classroom where they have an egress that's not to the hallway, it's to the outside or whatever. What's your recommendation? I think that's something that people need to be discussing. Is it better to lock down, or is it better to try to get out of there and beat feet and get away from the killing? What are your thoughts on that? Because there's no one easy answer to that.
No, there's absolutely not. And every situation is dramatically different. I subscribe to, for the students, I subscribe to the run, hide, fight. Run away, get away, stay out of the fight. If that doesn't work, you barricade and lock the doors. And if that doesn't work, and if they come in, you fight with everything you have and take pieces of their body off.
Yeah, and nothing should be off the table. My daughters were little. I said, look, as my father once said, if all else fails, bite a man. It'll take the fight right out of him. Bite him, pencil through the eyeball, like whatever. You need to realize that your life's on the line, and you get to do things that are rather unpleasant in order to preserve your life. Stephanie Widener is our CEO, and she teaches a really good class for women on women's safety. And so one of the biggest problems is, especially for women, because women tend to want to think things are going to be okay and rationalize things. Like when there's a bad thing happening and red flags are being thrown left and right, they take a little bit longer than men, generally speaking, to be like, wait a minute, I need to do whatever I need to do. A generalization, to be sure. She says women need to radically and rapidly accept that this thing is happening. That's the first hurdle you have to get past is, look, listen, no one's setting off fireworks in the hall of your high school. If you hear that, 100% of the time that's gunfire. You need to know that's what that is and respond accordingly. Lost my train of thought. God, I'm getting old. 51 this week. Can you believe it? Anyway,
happy birthday.
So I feel like that should be something when we're talking to students and teachers, should be something that is stressed is don't waste time trying to figure out what this is. If you hear, what sounds like gunfire in the hallway, there's a 99.9% chance that's what you're hearing is gunfire in the hallway. It's not anything else. In the seconds in between you receiving that stimulus and beginning to act on it could make all the difference in the world. Locking that door within a half a second versus 5 or 6 seconds later could make all the difference in the world. These things go down very, very quickly, usually. I've heard different estimates on the rate of gunfire, how many people are shot per second or per minute or whatever. And I've never heard they'd be terribly consistent, but there is a rough average of how many people are shot per minute or per second. And so would you agree that getting everyone's headspace right, getting their heads right and rapidly accepting reality is part of the equation that should be taught to the students and to the teachers?
Absolutely. You're right. The fireworks you hear the sounds you hear are not fireworks. The Aurora Theater shooting, they thought that it was just they're throwing fireworks in the theater at midnight to watch Batman. No, it's not. I typically say 17 seconds, someone's dying. If you can mitigate that, if you can do anything to put time in your bucket and take time away from their bucket, you're on the leading edge. And yes, we have to have more of a aggressive posture when it comes to these things, and then back it down from there. You have to always think, and it's not paranoia, it's preparation. This is what I'm hearing is bad. I need to do something about it. Oh, it's everything's okay. We should have that mentality of
100%
of when it happens, not if.
So talk to us about Faster Colorado. What is that? What is it that organization does? And how did it get started?
Faster started in Ohio, and it was a training company for the armed school staff in Ohio. And I believe about 50 districts in Ohio have armed school staff. Laura Carno, who was our executive director, brought Faster to Colorado. and renamed it Faster Colorado. And what we do is we teach armed school staff. We have several different levels of classes, and typically what happens is the school goes into executive session at board and decides they want to have armed staff. From there, they talk to lawyers and insurance companies and things like that, and they determine what needs to be done for these staff. And in Colorado, it's usually there's one big insurance company who dictates a lot of how much training and how much qualification time, et cetera. And then from there, they start to find volunteers. All of the schools in Colorado who prescribe to armed school staff, every one of those schools, it's voluntary. So first, you have to be a volunteer. Next, you have to do some background checks, some additional background checks, psychs and things like that. From there, once that's good, you get your concealed weapon permit, and then you come to a Faster class. Faster level 1 is a 3-day class. In level 1, we start right out of the gate. We start with mindset, because if your mind is not ready for the fight, kind of like we've already talked about, you are not ready for the fight. So we get them in kind of an uncomfortable position. We talk about fear. We debrief some shootings, unfortunately, and it makes me very angry. I had to update the slides to include a debrief for Uvalde. We talk about Colorado use of force, and then we go out to the range. And then we have classroom here and there, range time. We do the combat casualty care, and they have to qualify. The qualification for Faster is essentially the same qualification for the state of Colorado Peace Officer Standards and Training. It is a 100% qual at 25 rounds for the baby cops getting out of the academy. For Faster, we add 2 more rounds, so it's 27 out of 27 have to be inside the silhouette.
Let's talk about that for a second. This is interesting. When I first became a firearms instructor many moons ago with my federal agency, I always thought to myself, that the idea that somebody shooting at a silhouette, that the shoulder, right at the edge of the shoulder or in the bicep or the forearm, is somehow not worth. I get it. It's not a 10 ring shot. It's not, it should be maximum points. But hey, man, if you shot someone in the right or left shoulder, if you blew up their bicep with a semi-jacketed Halipoint 9mm round, or if you shot them a couple times in the gut, that's not nothing. I mean, I think we should start stressing that. Like, it's not great. You want to get center mass. Obviously, that's what's going to stop the threat. But I don't know. I think at some point, some scoring reevaluation needs to happen, because I've seen people almost not qualify, even though all of their rounds were on the silhouette. They just weren't in the right ring. You know what I mean?
Right. And the feds are very high on the points system.
Yeah.
I know it is at FLETC. I've been through that instructor class at FLETC. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's going to have some effect. If you shoot somebody in the muffin top, it's not going to stop them, but it'll slow them down. They're going to know it.
I've never been shot in my personal muffin top, but I can't imagine that's a very pleasant experience.
It's pristine.
So let me ask you, has any schools, if you can talk about this, has any school staff in Colorado ever had to even draw a firearm in defense of their students? Has that happened yet, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge. The only incident I know of with this type of training was in Ohio, and a suspected active killer was walking into the school with might have been a shotgun, and a staff member who was armed saw him, took a position of cover and concealment, challenged him, dropped the gun, and it was stopped even before it started.
Beautiful. I mean, what better outcome could you hope for once an active killer is in the school, right? There's another guest we have, Ed Monk, who talks about the importance of seeing and hearing the first shot as the responder. If you're an SRO, like one SRO on a giant high school campus is just not, it's insufficient. As good as that SRO might be, as locked on as he or she may be with their training and their motivation, if the SRO is on the football field 400 yards away outside with wind, they're not necessarily going to hear gunshots in the main office that's on the other end of the campus inside. So I think it's so important that we start really talking on a national level about this kind of program going nationally. It needs to be something that is way more common than it is, because there's nothing better than having numerous people who no one knows who they are. They're just, could be a custodian, it could be an administrator, or it could be a teacher, it could be a soccer coach or whatever, at various important points throughout the school. We talk about the vast majority of these things start at the front office or the cafeteria, right? Is that correct? Is that what your syllabus would say? That's what I keep hearing.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So
front office is where they're going to encounter the first person who might give them some friction.
Right.
And then the cafeteria is where the most soft targets are at.
Another thing I discussed with my other guest was, look, I think the biggest emotional response from parents or teachers who don't like the idea is, well, a student can get a hold of a gun and, kill someone, or I could have an accident, or they could forget it somewhere. I got to be honest with you folks. Your SRO is as likely, if not more likely, to accidentally leave their gun in the stall in the bathroom, or at IHOP or wherever else for that matter. So his point was, we need to overcome these sort of emotional arguments from people who just don't want guns in schools, because that's the bottom line. Like Grossman says, we're willing to have fire suppression systems and fire extinguishers because we accept the fact that a fire could happen, but we don't like guns in our schools. Let me ask you. Oh, go ahead.
So, to talk about real quick about the SROs, and then I'll get to that point. I think the SROs should be just absolute knuckle draggers, very aggressive, yoked, just big dudes and dudettes who have seen the inside of the gym, because that's a deterrent, number one. The problem, not so much with my agency, but if we look at Parkland, it was a retired on-duty SRO who was just waiting out his days, and then he waited outside that door for children to die. It needs to be the SRO position is the most important position, because those guys and ladies are protecting our most natural, precious resource, which is our children, the furtherance of this great country, our cultures, and all of those things. And our SROs have to be locked on in the best we have. Now, to speak to your point, I've got some stats from Riley Bowman at concealedcarry.com.
I'm a big fan of Riley Bowman. Go ahead.
Riley Bowman can shoot, by the way. We compete a lot together.
He can put some holes in some paper. I've heard.
He destroys me. So this is from 2018, and 33 incidents where armed citizens were present. 75.8% of the time, the armed citizen stopped or helped stop the threat. 18.2% of the time, they helped save lives. And 6.1% of the time, they did nothing. So if you do the math, for you people out there who are listening to this podcast, who are carrying your firearm every day and facing evil and helping our society, you guys are making a difference. And we need your help, and we continue to need your help. And thank you, because those stats are because of you, not because of the law enforcement officers, not because of Mike with his service and what I've done. It's because of you. And we need more people like you.
I thought I could end all crime in my career. Turns out I was wrong. I couldn't do it. I don't know about you. This is just kind of a fun aside. You go to a jail or a prison to interview somebody. Everyone you talk to is like, you know what? I was with this guy and he had this stuff. I was with this guy and he did this thing. Quinn, we got to find that one guy. He's out there, and all of his accomplices end up behind bars, but he is still free. I can sense it.
He's the mastermind.
He's behind it all.
Pablo Escobar.
Yeah. So, Faster Colorado. Let me ask you this: Is there a like an umbrella organization for the various states, or does each state just have its own one of these organizations, or the states that do have it have their own? There's no umbrella national thing, is there, or is there?
No, there is not. Essentially, Laura Carno brought it to Colorado, created this entity. I don't like calling it a business because we don't make any money. All of the teachers go through, or it's all sponsored. It's all sponsored money. from donors, from raffles, we've got some other sponsors that I'd like to talk about later on. And all these people are going through for free. There is no umbrella. I think a lot of other states, and in some places in Colorado, we'll just find a firearms instructor or firearms training company and go to them. And it's not a hard recipe. You talk about mindset, you talk about use of force, you talk about combat casualty care, you talk about firearms, you shoot, you qualify, and then you do some reality-based training at the end of it.
Yeah, none of this stuff is, as I said earlier, none of this stuff is rocket surgery. Like, combat casualty care isn't difficult. It's not complicated. Stopping the bleed is not complicated. Like, I feel like some of that stuff, balancing a checkbook, stopping the bleed, and, whatever else. There should just be high school classes that everyone gets, like, to graduate high school, is just basic stuff that can help everyone out. CPR, first aid. None of that stuff's terribly complex. So initiating this in your area is not the end of the world. It's not hard to do. If you're listening to this and you don't have something like this in your state, maybe it's you. Maybe you're the one that needs to stand up and raise your hand and go, let's get this started. I don't know what I don't know, but let's give this a shot. If someone is in that position in a state that doesn't have currently doesn't have legislation for this sort of thing, can Faster Colorado help them? Is there anyone there that could be like, hey, this is what you need to do, this is how you get started? Or do you recommend they talk to Ohio or Iowa?
No, absolutely. Contact Faster Colorado. We're more than happy to help you. We don't see other training companies, other instructors as competition, because we're trying to save children's lives.
Right.
I don't care if somebody in Colorado starts another class, as long as we are protecting and saving children. Don't care. But if you need help starting it, please contact us. We will give you everything you need to start your program wherever you are at.
And how would they get a hold of you?
Faster Colorado, just go on the Googles, and you'll be able to get all the contact information there.
So Quinn, tell us about the Instructor Program. If you're picking someone up to be an instructor to teach this sort of thing, walk us through how that works.
Well, we are all active duty first responders. We have, it was all active duty law enforcement, but we brought on a fireman who we give him so much. He's a great dude. We give him so much stuff about being a fireman, but
we love our hose draggers though.
Yes. He's got 4 combat tours in Iraq as a Marine. So we give him a little bit of flack. And right. He's one of the smartest individuals I've met. Anyway, we're all active duty law enforcement or fire protection service. Every one of us have SWAT experience or are currently on a SWAT team. And the advantage of that is we are seeing trends every day. We are training people every day, with an agency of my size. We're training a certain amount of people every month. All of our guys most of our guys even have their own side businesses in firearms training. So we're seeing a lot of students and we're learning from those students. And we're directly applying that to teaching these teachers and how to deal with an active killer.
I would love nothing more, and I said this to another one of my guests, than to get you, Carl Chin, Ed Monk, John Correa, anyone else we can find, and have some senator from somewhere call you guys to D.C. to sit in front of Congress. Every time there's another mass shooting, every time there's another school shooting, it's always we have to do something, in quotes. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. What do you mean do something? What does that mean exactly? And every time it's the same gun control nonsense. Look, there are more guns than people in the United States. You're never going to get rid of all the guns. So that's never, ever, ever going to be the solution to stopping these sorts of things. And let's say you get rid of every gun in the country right now. There's still some troubled young man who's going to walk in with Molotov cocktails or a knife or a sword or a truck bomb or whatever. There's always a way to kill innocent people if you want to. I would love nothing more than, and maybe I'll make some calls, to get people like you in a group, smart people who have experience, who've been there, who've responded to these things personally, as I have, and talk to our Congress sensibly about this sort of thing. Nonpartisan, not Republican, not Democrat, not Libertarian, just sensible people explaining to them in slow, we have to speak to them slowly, they are politicians, in methodical detail what needs to change. And I think that's critical. So I don't know if you can get that started. Maybe I'll get it started, but I just think that needs to happen. And the public needs to hear about this stuff because they just don't. There's a small subset of people that listen to shows like mine and or go to the reload.com. You know, they're gun folks, they're 2A people, or they're cops or military or whatever. I think the general public somehow needs this to invade their consciousness so they hear these ideas and these frankly facts about how we can keep our kids safe for real. Banning extended magazines or whatever nonsense they're going to come out with isn't going to solve anything. It's just not. I don't say that because, you know, simply because, you know, my rights. I say that because it's just true. There's no amount of banning of anything. There's no amount of stopping people from buying more than this many rounds of ammunition a month or whatever the nonsense you come up with is going to stop these from happening. What's going to stop them is exactly what we talked about today. It's trained people with the right mindset who most critically are in the right place to see or hear that first shot, or in the case of the one you just spoke about a little while ago, can even end it before it ever starts. That's the only thing, in my opinion, that's going to help with these situations.
Well, you know, the first thing you hear is enough.
Yeah.
And the next thing is, well, we got to get rid of guns. You know, when in Colorado, they had a magazine ban come down July of 2013. And guess what? Crime didn't stop. At midnight, we're just sitting there on the street going, oh my gosh, it's all stopped. Yep. We're saved. That's not the case. What we need is we need more guns. And the reason we need more guns is because an armed society is a polite society.
Generally speaking.
If you get rid of all the firearms, like what Canada's trying to do, it's just going to end up like the UK. You get more stabbings. And so now you have to turn in your steak knives in the UK. Okay, that's not working. So we go to acid. This is a multifaceted problem, and guns are not part of it. There's so many facets when it comes to this active killer phenomenon. You know, you've got social media. These people don't want to be famous. They want to be infamous. They want to be able to, they want the highest body count. And, you know, what taught them that? Violent video games. I occasionally play violent video games. Doesn't mean I'm crazy. 99% of the people who play violent video games are not going to shoot up a school. But there is a chance that one of them will. You know, we have this violence is being glorified in media, and our children are seeing that, and it's desensitizing to that. We've got this mental illness problem that is taking off, and I don't know what the deal is with that, but in the 50s, there was, if I look at my notes, in the 50s, I believe there was 4 active killer events in the entire decade of the 50s. And now look at where we're at. Political correctness is another facet. You know, I don't want to get involved. And, you know, at Virginia Tech, he's locking up doors. People witness him putting chains on doors and timing it. They witness him at the range running by targets on the ground and shooting at them. And no one said a word because they didn't want to be involved and they didn't want to offend him. We have to stop this political correctness because it's hurting our society. And then I'm going to go out on a limb. The final facet that just out of my knuckle dragger brain is the family dynamic. We've got a lot of fatherless homes. We have women returning to the workplaces and not raising our children. You know, and a lot of these active killers, if you look at their backgrounds and you look at their lives, these are a lot of the factors that are involved. You know, we need strong families. We have to stop this political correctness. We have to call it how it is. If you see somebody doing something, don't say, well, you know, I didn't want to get involved. No, call the police. You know, the mental illness thing, who knows what that is? That's just a thing in itself. The violence, both on TV and in video games. You know, I didn't let my kids even look at an Xbox until they're over 8. And at that time, I had to test them. Is this real or is this fake? Well, you know, I know zombies aren't real. Okay, well then let's shoot some zombies. You know, and social media has to glorify everything. The algorithms of social media, They target certain audiences doing certain things, and then you have people like the guy in New Zealand who live streamed the entire thing in New Zealand, just to get the likes, just to be infamous. And these are some of the factors that I don't have an answer for. Mike, I doubt you have an answer for these things, but there are so many factors that are causing this problem, and it's not guns.
Yeah, I agreed with the vast majority of what you just said. I just, as I said earlier, I think the only thing that's going to, it's cliche. It's an NRA cliche. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Well, that's not untrue. It's just, even though it's a cliche, doesn't mean it's not accurate. And I think as I said earlier, I'll reiterate it, the only way to mitigate these sorts of things is to have trained, smart people on site, prepared with the right mindset and the right training to do what they have to do. I had not heard about that incident where he just challenged the shooter, he put the gun down, and no one had to die. That's great. It was very encouraging to hear. Talk to us about some of your sponsors. You said you wanted to give some shout outs here. Who are we talking about?
Yeah. So, like I said, Faster Colorado, the people who go through this, the armed staffers who go through, they don't pay anything. And we have some sponsors who help them out with that. We have Bullets Both Ways, which is an apparel company. Great people over there. Aaron is a great dude, and he's in the same mindset as us. Check out Bullets Both Ways. Next, have you heard of Life Spot app?
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, this is good. Life Spot app is an app on your phone that is geofenced around a school. And if something happens, if there's an active killer that starts, you swipe up, you go through the notification process, and within 6 seconds, this application will advise dispatch, rescue, and all law enforcement on-duty officers in the area that there's an active shooter within 6 seconds. And then this app, you can put where the armed staff is at. You can put where the bad guys are at. So you have command and control from a command level position. Life Spot app, doing tremendous things. Suggest that anybody who is in a school, check them out. When it comes to saving our kids, I don't want our schools to be prisons. I want our schools to be like casinos where people can walk in, be greeted, vetted, and then from there, go about their business. But the casinos, the security is top notch. They've got cameras. Mm-hmm. They've got layers of security, both armed, unarmed. They got cameras. And then this Life Spot app is just one more thing, one more layer that can notify. It's incredible. It can notify law enforcement within 6 seconds. And then finally, Shadow Systems, which is a firearms manufacturer in Plano, Texas. They make high-end Glock operating system firearms. Anything that you would want to do with a Glock, it comes from the factory like that. And it is not a Glock. It is a Glock operating system. It's not a Gucci Glock. It's not a Super Glock. It's made in America with tons of innovations. Anything you want to do to a gun, it comes from the factory, and it's all made in America. Shadow Systems is a great firearm, and I carry those on duty. I shoot them in competition. Great people down there, great Americans.
And so these sponsors aren't paying you money. These sponsors are helping to fund these classes for the public school employees, correct?
Well, correct. But Shadow Systems is my competitive shooting sponsor, and then I introduced them to Faster Colorado. So,
very good. Yeah. As Ken Jeong once said, with a sombrero on, I'll allow it. Hey, folks, listen up. A couple of housekeeping things I want to talk about real quick. Last week's episode absolutely blew up, and has twice the plays of any episode prior. So if you're new to this podcast and you're listening for the second or third time, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Please do me a favor and subscribe to this podcast on whatever Apple or Spotify or Google, whatever you're using. Tell a friend. People who listen to this sort of thing generally have friends who are interested in the same thing: Second Amendment, self-defense, that sort of thing. Tell a friend about it and tell them to check it out and maybe subscribe as well. Don't forget to stick around with our talk with Stephen Gutowski, who says hi, by the way, Quinn. He says hi to you.
Hello.
We'll have a talk with Stephen here, and well, I think we're going to be discussing the recent Senate gun grab. I'll call it gun grabber legislation. That's what it is. Response in scare quotes to the Uvalde and the Buffalo shootings, which will do no good whatsoever, probably. Quinn, I really thank you for taking the time to come on. I thank you for your service. I appreciate you protecting those kids and getting the awareness out there so we can get a more effective deterrent and more effective response to school shooters. Thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it, Mike. And I just want to say one more thing before we cut off. Just like you, I've seen evil, and I've seen what human beings can do to each other, and it is scary. But when we face evil and we look it in the eye, we take power away from it. Like I said, this changed the course of my life. And when I got home from that active killer, and one student died, and I didn't do anything. I really did nothing. I just showed up. It affected me so much that I was standing over my boy's crib, and he was probably 6 months old at the time. And I looked at him and I said, I promise there will be no more victims. For whatever I can do, I will not allow any more victims. And that's why I started this. And it has changed my life. So of the death that came through it, some positive has come through it. But for all the people listening, you are making a difference. We've read the stats. Keep doing the good thing and fighting the good fight. We need you. We need you now more than we've ever needed you in the past. This is a dangerous times we live in. And when you look that evil in the eye and you say, not today, you are not taking me, you're not taking my family away from me, you take power away from it. Keep it up. And we love what you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Quinn. Take care, buddy.
Thanks.
Alrighty, gang. Welcome back. It's time once again for the Gutowski Files with our friend of the channel, friend of the podcast, Stephen Gutowski. Stephen is the founder of TheReload.com and the host of the weekly Reload podcast, which is available on all your finer podcast outlets and YouTube. And if you're a member at TheReload.com, which you should be, you get it a day early. Stephen, welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. I like that ASMR, the selling line there.
Yeah, I'm gonna put some brushes on the mic next or something.
Yeah. That'll definitely boost membership,
I think people will probably run away, as they should. So we are talking this week about, I think, what everyone's talking about, aside from the atrocious police response at Uvalde. They're talking about this new legislation that passed the Senate. And, I've looked over some of it. I haven't obviously probably studied nearly as close as you have. So why don't you tell us about how our politicians are saving us all from gun violence?
Yeah, so the Senate bill's text finally dropped. They finally came to an agreement on the details and published the text about, an hour or two before they actually voted on it.
We have to vote on it. We have to pass it to see what's in it, Stephen. You've heard that before.
Right. To be fair, it's only 80 pages, so it's shorter than some of these other giant omnibus bills that they tend to pass. But and they haven't voted on the final. It hasn't made the final vote yet. They had a procedural vote to move it forward, and then the way that the Senate has a bunch of rules on how this stuff works, but they should be able to get to a final vote probably by Friday or this weekend. They want to get this done before they go on the 4th of July recess. That's been a big sticking point for a lot of this. Is like they want to get it done. They have the votes together on a deal in theory, and so they wanted to get the text out and get it done and get the votes so they can move on and the coalition doesn't fall apart. Right. That's the dynamics of the Senate politics here. But so what's in the bill, right? Well, it's got all the stuff we talked about, but now we have more insight into exactly how it works, right? So there's one of the big ticket items that a lot of people talk about is the red flag funding provision. And that was one of the sticking points with Senator John Cornyn, the Republican from Texas, who's sort of a big key player in this negotiation because he's kind of the go-to guy for gun policy in the Republican caucus. And he wanted to extend that funding that could be used for, federal dollars for state red flag laws, right, to implement them. And sort of the idea was to encourage states to adopt this policy, because only 19 have it right now. Most red states don't have it. But he wanted to extend that funding to other sorts of crisis intervention programs, like drug courts, mental health courts, veterans courts, different programs that would intervene with somebody who's in a crisis situation, but not a red flag law that confiscates somebody's firearms, right? And they did that. So it also includes a model bill. So there's certain requirements that a red flag law would have to meet before it could receive federal funding. But in the end, I think that provision is probably not going to actually do much of anything other than just give out money to states that already have red flag laws. And most of these states that don't have them probably won't pass them because they're not popular politically in those states, honestly. Like even Texas isn't on track to pass a red flag law after Uvalde. That's not something that is popular there. So, and the fact is you can use that federal grant money for something else. So it's sort of, they took away a little bit of the incentive to pass a red flag law. And frankly, the requirements for the red flag law, the due process requirements and, stuff like having a punishment for somebody who's falsely filing a red flag law, most of those things, especially the way this is written, it's fairly vague and generic, and probably the laws in practice right now all already meet those relatively low standards that are in there. So it's probably not going to incentivize states to change their current red flag laws either. So that's one major thing. That kind of turned into not much other than just kind of funding for states to do whatever they want with in regards to crisis intervention policies. But there's also there's some more there's some more significant provisions when it comes to juvenile criminal records. So what they ended up doing with this, there was a lot of talk about how this would work in real life. What they ended up doing is so right now it's illegal for you to knowingly sell, for anyone to knowingly sell a gun or ammunition to somebody who's a prohibited person because they have a felony conviction, a misdemeanor domestic violence conviction, or they were adjudicated mentally ill or involuntarily committed, right? Those are the sales prohibitions. So now they've just said all those things, but also it extends to your juvenile records. So if you had committed a crime and were convicted as a juvenile and had to spend, and the punishment was beyond a year in jail, that's a felony, then you're prohibited for life. Same for domestic violence misdemeanor, and same for being involuntarily committed. Although for involuntary commitment, they do have a requirement that you be 16 years or older. And then also they've created, it seems related, but it's actually kind of separate, because that juvenile record thing applies to anybody of any age. You could be 90 years old if you had a juvenile criminal record. Up to this point, it might have been expunged or not included in the background check system. But now, if that record ends up in the system, which is what they're trying to accomplish here, you'll be prohibited from buying guns. Although in a weird quirk, the way it works now for adults, people with adult records, is you can't sell them guns. And also they can't possess guns themselves. That's a different section of the law where it says, the same requirements, felony, domestic violence, misdemeanor. There's a few other ones, fugitive from justice, somebody who's currently an illegal user of drugs or a user of illegal drugs, right? But for some reason, they don't extend the juvenile records portion to the possession aspect. So I think it's just a drafting error. Like they just didn't include that section because it doesn't really make sense as something that was intentionally done. But
it's a good thing they're rushing it.
yeah, they're certainly they're certainly rushing it. They were making floor speeches about it while it was still being written, and the text hadn't even come out yet. So they're trying to get it done really fast, and I think this is probably a result of that. So you can't sell a gun knowingly to somebody with a juvenile criminal record. That includes one of those things. But for some reason, they can legally attempt to buy one, or they could legally own them. You could gift them, perhaps, if you're related or something along those lines. But so I don't know if that'll get cleaned up in sort of the amendment process that's going to happen here, most likely tomorrow, or Thursday, Friday, sometime, or what's going to happen with that. But the other thing that sounds related but really isn't is a new background check process for people who are 18 to 20 years old. So right now, anyone who goes to buy a gun, it's designed to be an instantaneous process, right? That's the intention, at least, which is that's why they call it the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, right? You can be delayed if they do the background check and they find perhaps you have a charge pending against you in a jurisdiction that shows up. They can delay that background check already under current law for up to 3 days to try and see if that pending charge is for something that would make you prohibited, like a drug possession charge. Because, as I mentioned earlier, you can't buy guns legally if you are addicted to illegal substances or a user of illegal drugs. That's the language in the bill. So if you have a pending charge for possession of illegal substances, then you would be prohibited from buying guns. But the way it works under this new process for 18 to 20 year olds is that it seems at least that practically it would end up pushing most of them into that delay process, because what it requires is for the FBI through the background check system to reach out to all of the local or all the state repositories for juvenile criminal and mental health records, basically, and see if they have any records on you. And they have up to 3 days just to see if there might be a record, right? That makes sense. So they're supposed to do it as soon as possible, but they have up to 3 days just to find a sign that you might have a disqualifying record. And then from that point, and then overall, they have 10 business days to complete an investigation into whether or not you have a disqualifying juvenile record. So it's sort of a de facto waiting period. It's the language says that they have to do it as soon as possible, but there's a limit of 3 days to find a warning, find some sort of flag that you might be prohibited, and then 10 days total to complete the investigation before then the gun can be sold to you without a determination. But then that process actually sunsets after 10 years. So that special background check process for 18 to 20 year olds will go away in 10 years under this law. I believe the idea, as I've heard it explained, is that by then, all the juvenile criminal records will be commonly uploaded to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. You won't need this extra process. There's a lot of other stuff too. They changed the definition of the standard for who needs to get a federal firearms license if you're selling guns, to make it's still fairly vague, but it focuses much more on whether you turn a profit on your gun sale or not. They also include school security funding. They include funding for expanding a mental health program that's been in existence in most states now, but they want to expand it to all states. Sort of mental health intervention program through Medicare. And they also changed the definition of domestic abuse to include people who commit misdemeanor violence against their dating partners, although they don't really give a clear definition.
Their definition is odd. I read it. It's very weird.
It's just kind of open-ended. It's not really definitive. It's like anyone who has a romantic or intimate relationship. And by that, then they go on to define it further, and it's just based off of the length of the relationship and the nature of the relationship. And it says it can't be a casual acquaintance or a relationship where people would just normally interact with one another in a social or business setting. So it really kind of just doesn't define it. It sort of gives guidelines on what it could mean. But that's another one where like they also create a sunset for that. So if you're convicted of a domestic violence misdemeanor against a dating partner, however that comes to be defined over the years by the courts, you'll be barred from owning guns, but only for 5 years. And then as long as you don't commit another crime, domestic violence in that 5-year period, or violate your probation or whatever, that those records will be wiped away from the background check system. But they don't do that for whatever reason. They don't extend that to the other kinds of domestic violence already included in gun prohibition. So domestic violence against someone you're married to, or somebody you have a child with, or somebody you live with, in a romantic partnership. But so that's I think that's maybe a long explanation. Hopefully it made sense, but that's kind of what's in there.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this in the weeks to come. As I told Steven, I live in Southern Arizona, and my air conditioning has stopped working, and it is, let me check the thermometer. It's 4,832 degrees in my studio right now. So we're going to keep this one a little short, folks. If you are lamenting